Welcome to the Salon Talk, Episode 3, with my guest, Celeste Myers. We pick back up discussing the lows of grief and the joy on the other side.
So I want to talk about like the low parts because again, we're talking about smiling through the pain. For me, what a lot of people, I don't know about you, but for me, it was very difficult because there will always someone all day, every day. I'm so proud of you. Oh, you're so strong. You're this, you're that. And so, I got to a point where I'm thinking in my head, like, you can't tell I'm broken. But of course, they couldn't tell because I'm smiling, right? Life is going on. And the thing is, people look and say, oh, I'm so proud of you. Oh, you're so strong or whatever. But it's like, I literally can't sit in this. Like, I got bills, I have family, I have a husband, I have a business or businesses. I have things going on. Like, I can't just stop. But for me, what people did not see was the at home part. Every night I got home, it got to a point. I'll say this: it wasn't like, I don't know if it started this way, but I ended up not being able to sleep. Like, I was, every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mom, but it wasn't my mom. It was her through her cancer. I started self-medicating. I started drinking, and one drink every other day became a drink every night, and then one drink every night became two drinks every night, and taking pills every few days became pills every single night. And so it became like this downward spiral. One day I just come home and I pour all of the liquor out. I pour all the pills out, and I'm like, I'm going to have to find a way to get through this. So was there ever that time, like for you, where, did you ever hit rock bottom? Like, did it rock you to your core where like you had to find like an outlet? Was
Absolutely. I think for me, if I am completely honest, it was the fear of me grieving that loss, what that would do to me. So for me, it was not only am I wearing this mask to try to cover up what I really feel like, it was, I don't even want to tap into the emotion behind it because I don't know what that's going to look like.
Yeah.
And not just look like, oh, I'm scared of like the ugly cry and it being really bad.
Yeah, like the dark side.
Yeah, like scared of was it, where do I go from that if the way I feel inside comes out?
It's almost like you're afraid of bleeding on other people.
Yes. For me, it was wanting to escape that feeling. Right. So whatever that was, wanting to escape that feeling because the pain was so great. And to be honest, like I didn't have time for it. Right. Like the day he passed, I immediately had to call family. Like I didn't get a chance to immediately grieve because there was work to be done. So I think for me, I used a lot of excuses of I can't even go there. Even with my husband, like he is my safe place and he is my person. But even with him, like I couldn't cry with him. I couldn't.
Yeah.
Because if I did, I didn't know how to, like if I allowed myself to, I would immediately stop crying because I was like, I can't go there. Right. Because if I do, I don't know how long this is going to last. I don't know where I'm going to go.
I'll stay here.
Yeah. And so I did. I masked a lot. I tried to cover up. And it allowed anxiety to creep in. I would literally, like my chest would be tight. I would be like where I felt like I couldn't breathe.
Yeah. It started to manifest physically.
It manifested physically. So I did, like, I would have a drink so that I could try to calm myself down. I would try to, escape in whatever form, whether that was I'm going to be in denial or I'm going to have this drink so that I can ease my whatever physically I'm feeling, try to escape it. I think work became really big for me so that I could just escape how I was feeling. because as soon as you go back to work, people act as if you're okay.
Yeah,
And that for me became an escape that was unhealthy. And I had to be real with myself and recognize, like, I didn't want to be on anybody's medication. I didn't want to kind of do anything that was going to create these bad habits. So I started going to therapy, where somebody who didn't know me, was not tied to how I felt or what I said. I could just be honest on that couch and cry without feeling like I had to be strong for somebody else.
I think that's the hardest part. Like, again, as women, we carry the weight of so much. And so, you being in leadership, you being a wife, you having to be a daughter who was not only caring for a parent who was terminal, but also your parent who was still here, then handling all of the business. There was a lot of weight on you. And so, the thing about that weight is that, like you said, we really don't even have time. It's like, but hindsight, would you have taken, because no matter how long we ran, like no matter how long we ran from those, and remember I would say, sis, it's gonna catch you. You can run all you want. Those feelings are going to catch you because they're never gonna go away. All you can do is mask them. All you can do is, out of sight, out of mind, push them down, drown them out with alcohol, drugs, or whatever the case may be, or whatever that person's vice may be. But at some point, it's gonna catch
up to you.
Yeah. So in hindsight, would you address it quicker? Would you, I mean, of course, everybody's journey is different, but would you do anything different? The way you handled it, would you do anything different?
I would have asked for what I needed. And I would have named it. Because I think as women, especially Black women, it's like almost like I can do it myself. I'll be all right. I'm fine. I'm strong, independent. I'll be okay and I'll make do. But I think there is strength in saying, I need help. I can't do this. I don't know what I need, but I just need you to listen. And there were a lot of people who reached out and said, like, hey, if you just need to cry on the phone, I will hold the phone and be okay. But my pride was so strong that I didn't even call. Right. And to be honest, back then, I didn't know what I needed. I didn't know what to ask for. But now, 2.5 years later, I do know what I needed. I needed a safe place where I could just let it all out and grieve with people who weren't going to judge, with people who weren't going to question my faith, who weren't going to try to, like, it'll be okay, weren't going to try to quickly allow me to get it together, but get it out.
One of the things for me was, I don't know about you, I didn't want to be around anyone who hadn't experienced it. Like, you would hear people like, I know what you mean. And you're like, no, you don't. Like, your mom is still here. Your dad is still, like, you ain't been through this. And so for me, like, of course you have those friends who are just, they're friends. They love you. They your partners. They got your back. But then, like, when it came to that support system, and it was really difficult for me to even allow my husband to be that person during that time because his mother was still alive. And so he didn't really comprehend what I was going through. While he was very compassionate, empathetic, he was there. But for me, like, to talk to him was very difficult because he didn't understand it. But then there was something that he said where it kind of brought me to understand that he was grieving too. When my mom passed away 7 years ago, and so me and my husband this year will make 20 years. So that was 13 years that she had been in his life. And she was a mother, like, she helped us. She was there. I mean, in all honesty, she would call him before she called me. You know what I'm saying? So I had to then realize, like, whoa, he's grieving too, because while I couldn't talk about it, he talked about it all the time. He was always like, man, I miss your mom. But when it came to me actually handling the grieving part, I could only talk to people who knew. So I ended up having older people,
Yeah.
who really gave me a lot of wisdom. It never, like I said, never made me question God. It never made me, be angry at God, but I definitely had my downtrodden moments. Like I said, that drinking and everything, that just was, it was awful.
It took me a long time to realize that Philip was grieving too.
Yeah.
Right? Because he never cried in front of me really. And he listened to me. I wasn't in a place where I could kind of like have those conversations with him and receive it. So, he let me grieve, and he was, strong for me, but it took me a long time to realize, like, he lost his father-in-law, but like he lost, a second dad to him. He lost a friend. He lost, every family gathering we had at the house. Like, they were outside together, doing things together, talking and laughing. And it took me a long time to realize that he was grieving. And in my realization that he was grieving, like, Philip struggled with, like, his faith kind of was shaken because he believed like my dad was going to be fine. Like,
yeah,
he never really accepted the fact that he was going to pass.
That's how we were.
Yeah. So like for him, he was angry for a little bit.
Yeah.
But we had this conversation where he was, praying and frustrated, and God basically revealed to him that my dad had free will. Like, it could have been a different way, but my dad was ready.
Yeah.
And that, he honored my dad's request. And that gave him some peace. And I think for me, you talked about wanting to be around people who understood. I am super blessed that Philip's dad is like a second dad to me. And we're extremely close. So he was somebody who I could talk to. Like, he and my dad were buddies. So my dad kind of pushed onto him like, hey, she's gonna need somebody. And he would talk to me, and he had lost both of his parents. In fact, when Philip and I first met was literally a month after my father-in-law's dad passed. So I met him when he was grieving. So we would talk all the time just about like how I was feeling, and he got it, like he understood.
I don't know how Philip handled it or how your husband handled it. Okay, so for me, Melvin he didn't know how to handle it. So I'll never forget leaving the grave site. Someone in his family was having a birthday party, and he asked me if I wanted to go. And I mean, what? No, I just put my mama in the ground. But his way of coping was different from mine. And of course, I'm an introvert. So, I mean, on a good day, I probably wouldn't want her to go. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, I'm an introvert. So on a bad day, I want to go get in bed, and I'll never forget what you can say.
Like, have you experienced a lot of loss in your family? Because Melvin's family is large, like Philip. Right. So for Philip, loss is like, okay.
We're going to another funeral.
We're going to another funeral. Like, I hadn't been to so many funerals until Philip and I got together.
Now, that's a good point.
In my family, it just wasn't the case. And my dad and mom, they didn't do funerals. Yeah. So it was very, recent that they would even go to funerals.
Well, I guess for me, one, my family is small. Two, I'm introverted. So I didn't do funerals from a kid. Like, my mom would have to drag me to the funeral, like kicking and screaming, because I would have nightmares. And this happened long into adulthood, where if I went to a funeral, I would literally have nightmares of the deceased. So I just hated going. But like you said, like, I didn't start going to funerals until Melvin. But his family is very large. So one thing I will say, I like to remember them the way I want to remember them. I don't want to remember them, stiff and over made up in this casket. Like, I hate the way they look at funerals. I hate when people say, oh, they look so good. And I'm like, no, they don't, they really don't. So for me, I just hate them. I've always hated them. But I did not understand, like I mentioned earlier, not understanding that he was grieving, the way he processed is different. So in my mind, I looked at that as very, very insensitive. But then hindsight, what ended up happening, like I held that in for maybe a month. And I'll never forget, it came to like this climax where I had been so shut down, that he ended up saying something to me. And when I tell you, we had the biggest argument ever. But at that moment, I guess because I had suppressed so much, I let everything out. When I was done, I literally had no voice. I screamed until all of this hurt, like all of my throat, all of my, like my vocal cords, everything was sore for like a week, and I literally had no voice. But I'll never forget, after we exchanged, even though it was very heated, he let me know that he was grieving and he was trying to find a way to make me feel better. And while he was trying to make me feel better, I had to get him to understand there is no making me better. This was my mother. There is no better. This is something God has to do. And so once I got that out and I understood where he was coming from and he understood where I was coming from, literally immediately after the argument, took a shower, came out. He was sitting on the sofa. He just patted on his lap. I laid down, put my head in his lap, and went to sleep. And that was the end of it. Like but we had to understand where each other was coming from. And so in marriage, I said all that to say, like, did you see where it affected your marriage in any kind of way? I know that he was grieving, you were grieving. That can be kind of difficult. Plus, you're having to be parents and all these different. So it's a lot of stuff. And your kids are grieving. We didn't even talk about that. Your kids are grieving. So that's a lot going on in a household.
It definitely affected us. I think it allowed me to be vulnerable in a place that I like just wasn't vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
I don't think either one of us expected to kind of walk through that journey that early in our marriage. So it allowed us to really just see each other as human beings and like people instead of like
husband and wife,
right?
Yeah.
Like to see someone that you love kind of grieving and needing you. It deepened my love for him, but then also I needed to be able to articulate what I needed in the moment, right? Like I don't have anything to give right now, so I just need you to lay here and hold me.
Yeah.
Or I need a break.
Yeah.
So the kids would go to his parents' house, and he would allow me some space, and we would talk. I think for me, because I masked so long, I think he walked on eggshells, not knowing how I was going to respond.
Yeah.
And then I suppressed a lot. So it was having difficult conversations with me about being and saying like, you need to go talk to somebody. And I wasn't myself, right? Because he knows the real me.
He knows the intimate part of it.
Yeah. The fake. He could see through all that I was trying to put on. And have those difficult conversations with me and say, no, Celeste, like, this is not it. Do something about it.
Yeah.
Cry, do something so that, you can get back to you.
Yeah.
You kind of mentioned the kids, like for me, I had conversations with Morgan prior to my dad passing. Like once he was like really, really sick, kind of preparing her. Like Morgan got to say goodbye. She didn't know in the moment that's what was going on, but she got to have, that conversation with her. We actually ended up spending the night with my parents. My dad got home and he was going to start hospice care that Saturday morning, and that Saturday morning he passed. So we ended up spending the night at his request. So, they were there, but the kids were so young that it was about a year more. Addie just realized, because she used to say he was at the hospital. He was just at the doctor. Like she just realized that he's gone. So they grieved in their own time, but I had to be well enough myself that I could be there for them.
Yeah, that has to be really difficult to grieve, but also be a role model.
It's impossible.
Or I know, I come in and I say this all the time. I commend parents. Y'all do a phenomenal job because, me not having children, I guess God would grace me with the knowledge or the wisdom at that time. But, I've been able to just do Marquita whenever necessary, and my husband be, compassionate enough or loving enough to just let me be. But I don't even know. Like I look at myself and I think myself to be very strong. But you having to grieve and be a mother and nurture them through their grieving process. I mean, that is, I don't even understand. Like, I can't even comprehend it.
I think that for me, they were initially a lot of where my strength came from, because I had to be strong for them. But they also were kind of the push to, I needed to be well for them. I couldn't dwell in what was going on and kind of just wallow in it. I had to find some healthy coping mechanisms so that I could deal with the pain that I was feeling, so that I could be the best mom for them.
People love to tell us, oh, time heals all wounds. Yeah, let's talk about that. I know for me, dealing with my mother now, of course, it's been 7 years, but this year it comes in waves. You live your life in a way that, as we strive to please God, they're still our parents and we know what they expect of us. So we continue along that journey. But there is this, ache that stays. And it's, I would say, unrealistic. I don't know. For me, saying, I understand the ideology behind the cliche. But is there ever really, I think we touched on it a little bit earlier, is there ever really real healing?
I feel like I've learned how to deal with the pain.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm constantly like yearning for a conversation, for a hug, for, something that is familiar, kind of with my dad's presence. But I've learned to deal with it the best way I can. Some days are better than others, and I just learn how to push through, right? Like, there are days where it feels unbearable, and there are days where I can smile at a memory now, right?
Yeah.
Or I can laugh at a story. But I don't think that time heals, because I think the word heals means like almost like it's covered up and it's okay.
Yeah.
Like, it's no longer there.
No longer there.
You may see the remnant of a scar, but it's no longer open. Right? Like, that wound's not open. But I think with grief, because it is ebb and flows, I think that there are some days where the wound is gaping wide open. And there are some days where, it is healed over and, gives the appearance of being okay. I wish as a society we were okay with being real.
Being real and acknowledging our feelings. Like,
and having the coping mechanisms in order to know what to do with those feelings.
Yeah. And not let them become hazardous.
Yeah.
To us. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Like, I think about, like, even when I was saying earlier, like, I didn't know how to grieve. I hadn't really experienced a lot of loss prior to this. So I didn't know how to grieve. I didn't know what was healthy and what was not. I didn't know what was normal and what was not. So the masking became kind of my survival tactic, just to kind of be able to move through. But I wish that, I had kind of been armed with the tools necessary to be able to navigate that space and to handle my emotions.
You have to relinquish feelings, hard feelings. You have to forgive. I'm really big, and that just seems to be the going theme of the podcast is forgiveness. Even though on last episode we talked about molestation and sexual abuse, forgiveness is such a big part of it. And so forgiving one another, again, relationships may not always be great, but you don't want, like you said, you don't want to be at the end and you leaping in the casket because you got all of these regrets and can't find a way. And that helps also with the quote unquote healing. I
Yeah.
don't even know what to call it. We're going to put it in quotations because I don't even know if it's really healing or like we kind of call it coping. But one thing that I wanted to really talk about, and we'll kind of bring it to a close, but God's hand in it all. We kind of touched on it earlier, but I know there are a lot of people who experience death and really can't see the hand of God. And one thing that you said earlier that was so important is, asking God, what is the lesson in this? And so, what lessons through this journey have you received? And are you still, I mean, I'm pretty sure you're still learning, but how impactful, what lessons have you learned through this whole journey?
So there was a quote that I found right after my dad passed. There was something to the effect of grief is the last act of love that you can give someone, right? So what I have learned is that as deep as the love is when somebody is here, that love does not diminish when that person is gone.
Yeah.
That love stays in, just as much as I love my dad while he was here, I love him just the same now that he is transitioned to be with God, right? Like, and it is okay to allow myself to express however I feel because my journey is my journey. It is not going to look like anybody else's.
Right.
It's not going to look like my siblings. It's not going to look like yours. It's not going to look like, anybody else who has gone through this journey. And it is okay for it to be uniquely mine because my relationship with God is uniquely mine and my relationship with my dad was uniquely mine.
Right.
So it needs to reflect me.
That relationship.
Yeah. And I don't owe anybody any explanation for it.
Yeah.
So on the days that I am smiling through my pain, it's okay. And the days that I need to cry and, I need to throw a temper tantrum because I wish that he was here and I wish I could call him. It's okay.
It's okay.
And just realize that your journey is yours.
That's
and,
right.
People are going to, because they love you, they're going to try to say things to make you feel better or try to make sure that you quote unquote heal from whatever that pain is because they love you and they don't want to see you hurting. But it is okay to have your journey be yours and to kind of redefine what grief looks like for you.
That's right. And I think someone needed to hear that.
Someone,
yeah, because people will try and determine what it looks like for you. But I think that was very powerful what you said. It is nobody's journey but yours, and you owe no explanation. One thing that was very, like I mentioned on the first podcast, and anybody familiar with me, I pride myself on creating safe spaces for women to be whatever it is that they need to be in that moment, because when we're out in the world, we have to be so much. Yeah. And so you could remember there was times I was like, I know you're going to go home and Philip going to be like, I thought you went to the hair salon, because we literally sat there and talked the entire appointment. And you're like, well, I got what I needed. I'm headed home. It is like, you didn't get your hair done, And so just being able to have someone or just that space to be authentically you. I believe that that is a huge part of learning how to cope with it. I don't believe in sitting. Yeah, I don't believe in sitting on those feelings. I told you that all the time. You got to release them in some type of way because they will manifest physically. Stress can become high blood pressure, can become stroke. It can become so much because our bodies were not designed to carry that kind of pressure, that kind of stuff. So, I definitely believe dive in and take your time. You ain't got to do it the day after. Like I said, my mama was on an island for a year. You know what I'm saying? So I would also just encourage people to just take that time and find what you need. It was a blessing that you had your husband who's like, go get a hotel, or you need to go see someone or something. Carve out some type of time so that you can find a way to learn how to cope with your new norm. And I think that's what it becomes, coping with your new norm. The person that was there who brought you into this world or took part into bringing you into this world, or who was just that, role model or, monumental figure in your life is gone. And so your life is different. And
I think also being open to new tactics to kind of get you through, because I think our mind is a very powerful thing, and it will protect itself. Like your brain is powerful, and it will try to protect itself.
We cannot neglect, and I told you that we cannot neglect the human part of us. While we are spiritual beings living in a human body, as Christians, God understands. I think that we have been programmed to believe that because we are spiritual, we never acknowledge the human physical side of ourselves. And so one thing that I am a believer on is acknowledging the human side. Now, while the scripture tells us to crucify the flesh, bring it unto subjection, all these things, while it does give us instructions on how to handle our bodies, how to handle our flesh, it does not tell us to neglect it. And so I think that is something that we must remember. Acknowledge it. This is something that I've been preaching just recently, is whatever you don't acknowledge stays hidden in darkness. And who is the king of darkness? And so if you never bring light to it, you give the enemy access to play and tap dance on that. And so he can take it and manifest it into something big and monstrous if you never acknowledge it. So acknowledge it. Make sure that you're like, I'm mad right now. I am sad right now. Or else you give him leeway to make it into something else. But once you acknowledge it, take it to God. I will have, and I mentioned that before, I will have conversations with God like I'm talking to you. It's like, God, I don't understand. God, I'm hurting. Do you think he don't know? He already knows. He's omniscient.
He's not hiding anything.
That's right. He knows everything. So a lot of times he said that his strength is made perfect in our weakness. Like his strength, like if we never acknowledge our weakness, he can never be our strength.
I think in having conversations like this, we are able to bring that human side so that people realize like it is okay with what you feel is completely normal.
Right.
It is okay to not know, how you're going to feel in the next hour. It is okay to not know how you are going to get out of bed tomorrow, but truly cast all your cares on God so that he can be your strength. Because I don't know how I would have dealt with this had I not had a relationship with God. Like,
I don't either.
I didn't have a relationship with my heavenly father, losing my earthly father, like, safe. Like, I don't know what I would have done.
Yeah.
Like, because, I am a daddy's girl. Like, I talked every day. Like, I don't know how I would have even moved on. But thank God I had a relationship where even though there were low times, even though there were days where I questioned, what do you want me to learn? So I can quickly learn this lesson.
Right.
Because this hurts. Through my dad's journey, like people were drawn to Christ.
That's it.
And that's beautiful, right? Like if his journey was for somebody to see his walk, or if his journey was for, someone to see how, like my brother was doting on him to see a grown man literally washing his father's feet. That may have touched somebody and literally allowed them to see compassion in a different way. Like then it was enough. Right. So,
and I think that becomes the lesson in it. While we can dwell on what they went through, for me, like you mentioned, like you didn't want to remember your father in the cancer stage. Like it took a long time for me to get through. Like I could not see my mother for the continual image of her with cancer. Like that's all I could see. But it wasn't until I could see past it where that I could begin receiving the lessons and even God, the impartations of God about what, things that I should have learned, or even just hearing the different lessons that she poured out, and just being able to see how many other people were blessed through her presence here on earth. And that becomes the part that allows you to smile.
Yeah.
Knowing that while they were our parent, while they were someone special to us, they blessed so many other people. And so just knowing that God graced us, that's how I look at it. He loved me enough to grace me with her presence until he brought her back home. And also knowing that they are in a better place. If we really break down what heaven looks like and what you encounter being on the other side and being in his glory, like literally sitting, right there. I mean, who can be mad? Like I say all day, they're better off than we are. And so you just have to find the small things that can make you feel better about it. And so then that becomes the pivotal moment in your journey where you can begin to heal.
Yeah. When I could smile again, right? Like think of him and smile, or think of a story and smile. Then that's when I knew I was going to be all right.
For me, it was so funny because my mom was a minister. And before she died, we began talking about reincarnation, oddly enough. And, I believe that when they're transitioning, they are, I believe, imparted with divine wisdom. I believe that because it's almost like they're kind of coming and going, I feel like they receive insight in the spiritual realm that we haven't gained access to because we are still very physical. And so for her to be a minister and begin speaking about reincarnation, I thought was strange, and not strange in a way, because, again, I'm very imaginative. And while I am very Christian, I'm very liberal, open, because we have not begun to comprehend the mind of Christ. So I don't ever put those limitations on him. And so when I was in my lowest moments, and you know this, but now the world would know, a ladybug would randomly appear. It became so bad that I thought I had an infestation in my home because they would just randomly appear in my lowest moments. But my mother called me Ladybug. And I thought it was so strange that she would talk about reincarnation. It was almost like she planted a bug or planted that seed to say, I'll be back. Just look for me and I'll be there. Was that a Michael Jackson lyric? But anyway, and so even in my lowest moments, I remember one time cleaning the house, and something told me I was broken. I was so low that day cleaning the house, and something told me to go to the pack that we had her extra obituaries in. And I remember having this thought. Literally, I spoke back like, why would I open that? Like, I'm already low. Why would I go there? Literally opened it, and as I slid the obituaries out, a ladybug came out of the container and landed on her face. Like, it was just, there is no reason that ladybug should have been in that pack. You know what I'm saying? So it was just like they were always around whenever I needed. Whenever I got my new business, I literally walked through like, Mom, you remember that? Like, Mom, I need to know this is the right decision. What should I be doing? I need your blessing. And literally looked up and there was a ladybug on the window. And I'm like, thanks. And while that may sound funny to someone else, you just have to find.
What is your God sign? Like,
Yeah.
what is the sign that is going to give you that peace?
That's right.
That they're okay, and that you're going to be okay, and that they're still with you. Because
right.
I think so we talk about like, oh, well, we'll see them again when we get to heaven. That sounds great, but that does nothing for me while I'm here to know that they are okay.
Here.
And I need some type of sign that is going to show me that they're fine.
I agree. So at this moment, I just hope that someone was encouraged through our transparency about our journey through grief. While as women, we have learned to power through and smile through the pain. There will come a time where you will have to deal with that grief. One thing my grandfather used to say all the time is, you can't outrun God, your legs aren't long enough. And so I feel the same way about grief. Another topic for another day.
The whole word.
And so, okay. And so I feel grief is the exact same way. You can't outrun it. You can numb it. You can, press it down, sweep it under a rug. But at some point, you're going to have to deal with it. And so I encourage anyone who is experiencing grief to seek counseling, build a support system, and verbalize what you need. And that takes introspection. That takes you to take time out. Even I know that we aren't trained to sit still. We are trained to keep going. But if you can't find the words to verbalize what it is that you need, then take the time out. If that's what you need.
Absolutely.
Find a way to find whatever it is that you need and get it. Again, like my sister said, you don't owe anybody an explanation. This is your journey.
I just want to challenge somebody out there. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're good.
I just want to challenge somebody. We've talked about our experience and kind of our journey, but if you have someone in your circle who is going through a loss, just show up for them.
Just show up.
Be a listening ear. Don't try to make it better, because you can't. Just show up for them, and just your presence means a lot, and your listening ear means a lot, because like you were that for me. You just showed up for me and allowed me to speak and just however I was feeling. And that was a lot for you to take in, having lost your mom too, so I thank you for doing it. And I challenge others to, we're talking about our loss, but also just take the reverse and just show up for somebody.
And know that there's joy on the other side. The enemy will attempt to keep you in this space. And again, like we mentioned, like whatever isn't acknowledged gives him leeway to play with. So the enemy will cause you to think that you have been forsaken. He will have you thinking that God is not real because you didn't get what you want. Again, I think that's where that misinterpretation comes from. He tries to play with it and pervert it and distort it. He will cause a lot of thoughts to come through your head. Now, this is when the scripture comes into play. When the Bible says, bring every thought captive under the authority of Christ Jesus, you have to begin thinking about what you're thinking about. And so if you're thinking these thoughts that are not of God, that are contradicting to what we know to be the truth, then we have to bring them unto captivity. Now, that's difficult. So I'm quoting it, I'm saying it, but we lived it. We know it's hard. So we're not expecting you to even get it on the first try. But definitely work at it. It's something worth working towards. Don't worry about keeping up facades and masks and carrying the weight of everyone else's expectation. Release yourself from that. Give yourself that freedom. Find liberty in Christ so that you can be what he needs you to be and what he's making you to be. Because there's a lesson in this. He's going to use this to make you better. While it does not feel that way, He will definitely use this to make you better. And so allow yourself time, allow yourself the space to be what you need to be in that moment, to do what you need to do in that moment, to say what you need to say in that moment. Just give yourself grace. That's the word.
I like it is.
It just hit me. That's the word. Give yourself grace. We're great at gracing everyone else, but we're our biggest critics, hardest critics. And so I encourage you to give yourself grace. Yeah, we hope you have been blessed. So until next time, we thank you. We thank you for tuning in. And yeah, we'll still see you next time. All right. Peace out. Love you. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Salon Talk. We hope this series has been a blessing to you. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share.